and make them their collaborators. Though many of those people will resist them and betray them. That's why it's important to understand the history, because it's not a one look. You know?
Right.
You have to really see the intricacies of resistance and rebellion and death. It's just like most people come to North America and say, well, y'all never really freed yourself. Well, you never looked at our history to say that. There's
Right.
recorded at least 300 plus African rebellions that was of significance in the United States, North America.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the Civil War, over 300,000 of us fought in uniform, and another 400,000 to 500,000 out of uniform behind the line, being workers, being supporters, being the people who carrying the equipment. So nearly 500,000 plus of us is fighting in the Civil War to destroy the Confederacy, both from within and without. That's a war of liberation on our part.
Exactly. We fought to free ourselves. It wasn't given.
Right.
It wasn't Abraham Lincoln. We fought to free ourselves.
We killed millions of white people. Okay. So y'all need to stop it and really see what happened here. And if you go back down to the British, we fought with the British who said, we're going to give you freedom. In the North, we fought with the British in the South. And the British, the people who fought with the North, they end up in Nova Scotia and then Sierra Leone. Nobody ever asked for the largest part of that black population went, who was in the South. Because the largest part of the black population fighting against America was not in the North. And you know where that population went? To Jamaica and to Trinidad. Okay. And they started the Poker Man movement in Jamaica. Those black Geechee Gullah people who fought with the British. And in Trinidad, Tony Martin deals with this in his book, his last book, God Bless His Beautiful Soul, History of the Caribbean. He deals with the population that went to Trinidad, and I went to that community. And the streets are named after different military companies they fought in for the British. And when it was, so don't tell me, if you don't know history, you say we accepted this. But if you know history, there's hardly a week went by when some black folks wasn't rebelling in North America. Well, the same thing went on in Africa. It wouldn't a day go by where somebody wasn't killing an enemy, escaping from slavery, leading an army against the enslavers, putting up defense against enslavement, and that's all across the continent of Africa.
And here in the United States, especially other ways that we rebelled against slavery, learning to read and write was a way of rebelling against slavery. Mm-hmm. And one of the things many of us did when we learned to read and write, we wrote our own freedom papers and ran away also. Because oftentimes the slave patrollers, a lot of them were illiterate. That patrolled the roads, things like that. So you can give them
with a stamp on, and it was good to go.
Yep, you can say this is your freedom paper.
But the resistance movement in Africa was extraordinary because Africans didn't view human beings as commodities. That's culturally out of sync. Our worldview didn't work like that. You can't view Africa through European lenses. Otherwise, you're not going to even understand what resistance is. To take a human being's name from them, that's tantamount to slitting somebody's throat.
Right.
You don't take a human being's name. Your name is your ancestral lineage tag. Takes you back to God.
Right.
And so if you just look at the African concept of being human, it didn't allow for chattel slavery to be a part of their consciousness. And even those who got involved in that selling people as commodity, like for that period in Dahomey and that period in Ashanti, and maybe some other places as well, one thing you will see for sure, they knew nothing about chattel slavery. They had not been on a ship coming to America. Not a single one of them owned the slave ship. All right? They didn't control the armies that was controlling the shores of Africa. These were all white foreigners with guns. They didn't own a single plantation in America or the Caribbean or Central South America. So let's stop giving ourselves excuses for why we can't look in the mirror and love ourselves. Because let me tell you what a lot of this is. This resistance is self-hate.
Correct.
And someone is trying to say, stop hating yourself, but hating me felt so good. So it's hard to stop. You know what I'm saying? And I'm saying, stop hating yourself. take this tool. No, this movie is not perfect. It's not a panacea. It's not going to solve all of our problems about the slave trade or history. But guess what? You watch movies all the time and you enjoy them. And most of them are nonsensical. Most of them disrespectful to Black people, disrespectful to things African and our spiritual system. And you enjoy them. This one fight to be the opposite of all of that. Go in and enjoy it. I guarantee you, you'll come back and call Brother Michael. Say, Brother Michael, thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Because I saw some Black technicians and some Black directors and some Black actors and actresses, and they put on a beautiful, fictitious performance inspired by the history of our people, about our women who were extraordinary warriors. And see, the thing is, these women were considered by the whole world that found out about them to be the most extraordinary of extraordinaries.
Right.
It ain't that they didn't exist. They exist. And the little piece of them that we see in this film that talk about their principles, their integrity, their dignity, their training, their devotion, their loyalty to their nation and their king, that's just a tiny bit of who they really were.
Right.
Because if we did not have these women, we would not have the woman who raised Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was one of these women in Haiti to give us the Haitian Revolution victory. Yes. It was one of these women from the Dahomey army who raised Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And my sister, Ezele Danto, is trying to get a piece out here. She's calling it the Dadas. It's about some of these women.
Yeah, I know her.
And
Danto, I know her.
Yeah, she's an extraordinary sister. The Free Haiti movement is what she's ahead of. And these women, many of whom was a part of that fighting force, who've now been captured and sold into Haiti by the French, they've not gotten old, broken down, can't have sex no more, they can't be abused no more, they can't work in the field no more. So the Catholic Church takes them, according to Ezele Danto, these ladies they call the Dadat, and they put them in a church lay organization to convert other young African enslaved women to Catholicism. But instead, these very ladies, these former warriors, train the leadership that become the women leadership in the Haitian Revolution.
Right.
And many of the women they trained marry the very generals we see as the heroes in the Haitian Revolution. This thing is bigger than you think it is, brothers and sisters. It's
exactly.
Than you think it is.
Right.
So if this movie does nothing else but make you pick up a book, grab a DVD and start studying, listening to Brother Carver, Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Clark, Dr. Jacob Rogers, Dr. Asa Hilliard, Dr. Amos Wilson, going back to our brother in England with When We Ruled.
Robin Walker. Walker. I got his book right behind me, Robin Walker.
And
brilliant brother.
See that we have an extraordinary history. We did not give up. Otherwise, we would still be in slavery.
Right.
We fought every single day from one end of Africa to the other, from one end of the Caribbean to the other, from one end of Central South America to the other, from one end of North America to the other. And we've transformed the white world. And what's so beautiful about Viola and her husband and that beautiful director and the others, they took the content and white intent and transformed white content to an African intent that made sense. They interpreted it in a way that they took the intent of someone else's content being the writing that was done. And all content has intent.
Right.
And so I'm just assuming, given history, what the intent might have been, even if it wasn't deliberate, just culturally. And I know these Black folks took that content and redirected that intent to give us a cinematic document that I think is rather extraordinary.
Okay, we're going to come back to that point in just a second. I want to go to this clip here. This is an excerpt of the interview that Viola Davis did on Good Morning America, because this gets deeper into it, and she talks more about making the film. Before that, we don't want to forget the sisters. We mentioned a number of brothers that are scholars. So Sister Nubia Wardford from here in Detroit, Nubia Marinke, she's watching as well. She just saw the movie. You know, Sister Nubia, she just saw the movie. She had extraordinary production, but also sisters like ancestors like Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Dr. Patricia Newton. You've got, we have Dr. Marimba Ani, okay, who wrote Yurugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. We have sister teaches the Meta Netter. I know her. It'll come to me. Ricchetti, Dr. Ricchetti Amen.
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Ricchetti Amen. So we have the sisters also, Dr. Talitha LaFloria, whose book is behind me, Dr. Dani Ramey Berry, Dr. Erica Armstrong Dunbar. So we have the sisters also.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, those watching, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, and visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. We have the information there, and my online classes. You can support us there also. How can people support you, Professor Small?
Well, always $ Cash App, Dr. James Small.
Okay, I'm going to put that up here also.
Yeah, but
you're going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, Sister Nubia, and how you doing, my beautiful sister, who's a heck of a historian.
Yes,
Politics archaeologist, doing research in Sudan, but the rest of us are even scared to go. You know, and she said it is correct that only 4% of Africans across the continent were involved in the slave trade, versus 96% Arab and European. And people need to know that. So if you think that 4% is big, just look at what percentage of the Black community sell drugs in the Black community, right, to you every day. That's worse than any kind of slave trade. So yes, you will have people who are weak. Yes, you will have people who will fall. But let's not talk about the weak. Let's talk about the strong. And what this movie shows is what a strong African woman looked like. Ms. Viola, girl, every step you took in this movie made the earth shake. Okay? And the young lady, who's the young lady that played her daughter?
Mbedu Thesu, I think is her name. She's from South Africa. She's from South Africa. Yes. She
was brilliant. And the sister who played her big sister who died in saving her life, she was brilliant with the way she brought this sisterhood concept, motherhood concept of adopting the orphan, bringing you into the family, taking care of you now. That piece that I grew up in on the plantation in South Carolina, that Africa, with so many of us grew up in Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas. Let's stop forgetting, because we brought Africa right here with us and we behaved in a certain way. What made you think we behaved any differently at home?
Right, exactly. It was Thusu Mbedu. She played Nawi, Viola Davis's daughter. Give us your Cash App again so I can put it up here, Professor Small. What's your Cash App again?
$, Dr. James Small.
Okay, Dr. James Small. Okay, we'll put that up here so you all can support Professor Small also. Okay, I want to go to I want to play a little excerpt of this interview. Viola Davis was on Good Morning America on September 13th, 2022, and let's go to this clip here.
It's a movement. This is so much more than just a movie, and you even talked about it being so important to you, and just that zenith for you.
That sort of magnum opus, I call it.
Yeah.
I think the same reaction that you have as an audience is the reason why I did the movie. First of all, it is a movie that's led by women. And it's a movie that's led by Black women. And it's a movie that's led by dark-skinned Black women. There is no white savior. you know, and it's women who are warriors tapping into not only their physical strength, but also when you see the movie, they're humanized. And so, when have you seen that? I remember someone online said, I'm tired of seeing dark-skinned black women as just strong and fighting and masculine. And I was like, when have you ever seen that?
We do now. We do now.
And yes. What a cast you've put together to tell this story.
Absolutely. Tuso Bedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, you know, Adrian Warren, who was in Tina Turner, you know, as well as Sia, Shioma, Jamie Lawson, women who are beyond brilliant, but also, I mean, women who are playing roles of Agojie warriors that literally, it could have been an action film. But when they walked in, you see people, you see humans. And I think that's what shifts.
You bring out the best in people because the critics are saying this cast, everyone in every single role, the best.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, here's the thing. You know, as a woman, you're taught that being a girl and being feminine is not about tapping into your physical strength. It's about being demure, speaking in a high voice, being polite all the time. Whereas the challenge of, the reason why I loved it so much is my body served me. And it was, I had to do 5 hours of weightlifting and martial arts every day.
Was that all new for you?
But you did have martial arts, you did weightlifting, you did sprinting, you did weapons training, but you had to take a DNA test.
DNA test, which I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see I'm lactose intolerant. I have a high rate of injury. I said I can't eat sugar. I mean, and I had to keep telling Gina, Prince-Bythewood, great director. I had to keep calling her and say, Gina, listen to me now. You know I'm 56. You know if I get on that treadmill at 9.4, I lose oxygen. If I'm at 9.4, I could die of a heart attack, Gina. These girls are 30 years old. Gina, you got to do something else. You got to do something else, Gina. You're going to have a dead warrior here.
Let's give everybody a look.
All right.
Your family, no wonder.
Okay, so that's an excerpt of a great interview that Viola Davis did on Good Morning America. That's on the Good Morning America's YouTube channel. That's from September 13th, 2022. Okay, any comments on that before I go to the next topic?
No, I think she said it all. I mean, this is Black women having an opportunity to interpret their racial history and at the same time to interpret the role that Black women have played in history, are playing in history, and could play in history.
Right.
You know, when we look at the civil rights movement in America, from top to bottom, there's that Black woman. You know, when Marcus Garvey goes to prison, he leaves Henrietta Benton Davis in charge of UNIA, and that's some brother. When Malcolm X goes overseas, he leaves a woman in charge of OAU. When Malcolm X died, his sister Ella becomes the president of OAU. When the youth was trained to do the bus rides in the South, these were Black women who organized that bus ride into the South and trained them into nonviolent tactics. You know, whether you ever look at civil rights leaders marching with Dr. King and others, you see all those Black women right there marching. You see Sister Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi, the most terrorist state in America at the time, who had been abused and raped in prison and beaten in all kinds of ways.
She was sterilized also.
You know, and forcing the Democratic Party convention to come to a halt. Nothing like that had ever happened in the history of America at the convention in Jersey. This Black woman had been fierce throughout our history. She is our mother. And any foolish man would get caught up in some white dialectic foolishness and not understand your mama, your wife, your daughter, your sister and you're caught up in some female demeaning, minimizing process, you know something's wrong with you. So go on and fix yourself.
Exactly.
Yes.
So before I played that clip, you were talking about the difference between the content and the intent.
Right.
The content and the intent. Talk about that, because we discussed that earlier today, and you talked about the two white female writers, Maria Bello and the other one, their intent, and then what Viola Davis and her husband Julius Tennant were able to do. Talk about that, please.
Right. Having worked on the film, I've seen some of the best writers who are well-meaning people who have done good research, and they're trying to write a Black story, but they don't come from our culture. They don't come from our value system.
So these are not African Americans. These may be white, other ethnic groups.
Right.
Just to be clear. Okay.
Right. They don't have our worldview.
Right.
And they're trying to tell the story. And what they end up writing is their content about us. But that content comes with an intent based on their value system and their worldview. And so I could see where Miss Davis and her husband would have to look at that content, analyze its intent, and then use the knowledge of being an African to take that content and alter its intent. You see, and the way we see the design. And you know, I can be critical, Michael, because when we first started, I'd get ready to beat up on Sister Viola. And I'd me back, Brother Small, you need to go watch it, Brother Small. And I watched it. And I
told Professor Kaba the same thing. Yeah. Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, I told him the same thing.
The work, and I know what they had to go through to accomplish the work. I know our history, because like you, I'm wrapped in history. That's my thing. I am history, you know, and I know the culture. Like if you look over my shoulder, you see Shango, the big guy, standing there with all of my electors around his neck. Next to Shango is my mother, Oya. Above Oya is the head of the Benin prince that the European captured and don't want to give us back that head. Sitting at the bottom is the Ashanti god, because I go nowhere without them. I immerse myself in the philosophy that surrounds them. And so, like Viola was talking about how she had to get in shape and to do this movie, because you could see it was very challenging physically. But you could see them meeting the challenge. And African culture, when you're trying to take the content written even by Africans themselves, because you got to remember, colonization and slavery have altered our consciousness to such a degree that much of our content have the wrong intent because of value system and worldview. And if you want to bring a message to really talk about taking content and creating an intent that will bring a message that will show, even in fiction, the possibility of what the history of a people could have been and should have been, they had a job cut out for them, and they met the challenge.
Yes,
they met.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree with that. People talk of one of the things that I see on social media and in the media in general, and also this came up. So this movie comes out right after Queen Elizabeth II dies. And then a lot of information comes out with the British involvement in not just the transatlantic slave trade, but in colonizing little more than 25% of the world population. Okay. So some people say things like, well, the British abolished the international transatlantic slave trade in 1807, and Dahomey didn't want to abolish it, or the British did the right thing, or they try to make the British out to be saints or something like that. And it's like, wait a second, they got involved in 1562, okay, and they didn't. And in 1807, when they passed the Slavery Abolition Act, that just dealt with bringing Africans into their British colonies. It was still legal to have slavery in the British colonies. They didn't end that to 1834.
Yeah, they didn't end slavery.
Talk about that.
Right.
Yes.
The British did not end slavery. What the British did was to interrupt the competition. Slavery produced for Britain the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But now those who had free labor was challenging the wealth of the Industrial Revolution. So Britain replaced its labor population with the Irish and the Scots who they were occupying, who had they had colonized in the British Isles. People don't even go back there. The Irish and the Scots, this was their land. British people we call British people, these are Germans, Anglo and Saxons who invaded
Anglos and
these
Saxons.
people. All right?
Right.
And so now they realize in order to make the money, they had already made all the money. All of the wealth that undergirds the Industrial Revolution in Britain comes from the transatlantic slave trade. All of them.
Right.
They had no wealth before that of any significance. Okay?
Right.
And so now they had that wealth. They wanted to move in another direction in terms of wealth building and wealth creation. But that was being challenged by these other states who was getting the wealth from slavery, from the slave trade. So France, who was the competition, Denmark, who was the competition, Spain, a competition, Portugal and Germany. Britain had to find a way to minimize their ability to use wealth from the transatlantic slave trade to challenge British hegemony over the burgeoning Industrial Revolution. Do y'all hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
You get it? Okay?
Yes.
So they trade chattel slavery for wage slavery on the Irish and Scots.
The Irish and the Scots.
And then at the same time, they want to minimize the French developing their industrialization and minimize the Portuguese and Spanish developing their industrialization. But to do that, you've got to then do what they went out there with ships and said, and they only have 3 ships out there. 3 ships that can patrol the whole Atlantic Ocean, give me a break, okay? So they went out there with ships and said, we're going to block you from trading, making money off the slave trade, because that's going to make you wealthy enough to compete with us in this new industrial direction we're going in. And we're going to say we're doing something for humanity. But at the meantime, they still got people enslaved, not just in Britain itself, but in all the British colonies around the world.
Well, now we're going to take it a step further, and then I want to just show briefly some information dealing with the Industrial Revolution, because I do a whole presentation dealing with the African American origins or African American roots of Labor Day history, and this goes back into the origins of the Industrial Revolution, starting in the 1790s in Manchester, England, and a lot of the cotton that was being produced at that time was produced by African slave labor. So when we look at it, people can read this article here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but read this article. It's a fact check. It's from USA Today. I've talked about it before in the African History Network show. This deals with United Kingdom finished paying off debts to slave-owning families in 2015, which they did. They had to take out a loan to pay. Now, what happened was when they abolished, finally abolished slavery in 1834 in their colonies, Britain pays 46,000 British slave owners. They paid them reparations. It's about 19 million pounds. I don't know what that translates to in dollars. It was about 19 million pounds. Okay. And then they take out a loan to pay them. They just finished really paying off that loan and the interest, things like that in 2015. But this section here in the article, in total, about 3.5 million African people were transported to British colonies across the Americas and Caribbean, though only 2.75 million survived the harrowing Middle Passage in the confines of slave ships across the ocean. So you would think the way a lot of this stuff is floating around, Professor Small, you would think it was Dahomey that sold 3.1 million Africans.
Right.
The British get left off the hook. They get let off the hook.
And that's why it's important for people to go watch this movie, because Dahomey is simply prototypical of African resistance. The movie. This could have happened anywhere in Africa because it did happen everywhere in Africa.
Right.
Let me say it again. this could have happened anywhere in Africa because this type of resistance happened everywhere in Africa. You know?
Yes, the resistance happened everywhere in Africa, and then also a lot of African ethnic groups, nations were given an ultimatum by Europeans: either you provide us with African captives, or we're going to take you also. Because the Europeans are coming with the.
They had a military presence stationed on the shore. That's what slave dungeons were. Slave dungeons were forts that housed their military with their cannons and their armament that they could come up with on any given day and wipe you out, which they did on many occasions.
Right.
So let's study the thing and understand it. I want my brothers and sisters, especially African Americans, stop being cowards about learning your history. Don't come tell me about the baseball game, the football game, and the basketball game, and who's got a girlfriend, who's got a boyfriend, what's this one stat, and what's this, and none of that takes any money home to your pocket. None of that transform your consciousness and allow you to be a better person so you can raise your children in a safer world. History does that for you. History gives you a worldview. History gives you a perspective on your daily reality. History tells you who your friends and enemy has been and who your friends and enemies are today. Instead of you looking at yourself and hating yourself, hate the person that destroyed the image of yourself while you're restoring that image to yourself. And this takes study, but you don't have to study hard. I've got at least 100 tapes on YouTube. Just go listen to Brother Smoke. Ain't gonna cost you nothing. You know what I'm saying? Go to Michael Imhotep's education channel. Tune into his classes. Tune into Baba Kaba's classes. Tune into Dr. Ma'at. See what blow you away. And you'll realize that people say, well, where do I go to get the history? Just turn on your computer. You don't have to turn on your computer. Turn on your cell phone. All of us is all over your cell phone. Okay.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I created the African History Network in 2010 to provide that information. Absolutely. Very quickly here, and then we're going to wrap up. And I want you to let people know. I want you to give people your website and tell people about your courses coming up, anything like that as well. But very quickly, we talked about the Industrial Revolution. Now, this comes from the BBC. This is part of my presentation that I do dealing with the origins of the Labor Day holiday. This is from bbc.co.uk, and they have a lot of documentation on all this, the BBC. Slave trade and the British economy. British profits were made from exporting manufacturing goods to Africa and importing products of enslaved labor, such as sugar. Ports such as Glasgow, Bristol, and Liverpool, England, where the Beatles were from, and Liverpool prospered as a result of the slave trade. So they go through and they have all these charts and things like this, but there's a portion here dealing with cotton that I just want to focus in on, and I want to see if I can get to this. Okay, they talk about this. I can't. Let me see which page is this on. They have these slides here. Which one is this? Okay, this is 3. The role of the trade in navigation. And okay, this deals with manufacturing. So this one right here shows economic growth and the Industrial Revolution. Many historians describe the Industrial Revolution as a process rather than as an event. The part that exports played can be shown as a virtuous circle. So exports grow, industry grows, business owners invest and look for better machines. Machines get better, products get cheaper. Exports grow, you have this cycle.
They were trying to corner the market when they did this thing of blockading the slave trade. Because they were trying to corner the market and the Industrial Revolution development and did not want the competition from the French, the Germans, Spanish, and the others. But you can't do that unless you take away how they're making their money. You understand? They don't abolish slavery now. They said they're abolishing the slave trade. So they're interdicting these ships. But that is to knock the competition out of the game. And in the meantime, they take the African knowledge of how to make steel and become the premier steel makers in the world, right? And so the guy who founds Chase Bank, right, gets trained by the House of Rothschild, sent deliberately over to England because America was using the steel from Britain to build the railroads to bring the cotton to the market to feed the British cotton industry, textile industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so this about, and then so what they began to do in America was, instead of, even though they were still bringing us in on ships and beating the blockade, they began to breed us over here.
Right.
Instead of
after 1807, because the U.S. March 2nd, 1807, the U.S. Congress passes a bill to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
The U.S. involved,
but not abolish
that goes
slavery.
into effect. No, I understand.
Right.
Trust me, I understand. That goes into effect January 1st, 1808.
Yes.
Okay. That's based upon Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
That stipulated the earliest that the international transatlantic slave trade could be abolished was 1808. That means bringing Africans into this country to enslave them. So all the now here's the thing. They kept doing
that is to knock out because America and Britain are partners in this. So they want to knock out the competition, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Brandenburgs, the Dutch. And by cutting that off from them, they're
cutting off the supply.
Right. They're cutting off the supply. And in America, where they had a large enough piece of territory and a large enough Black population, they could go into the breeding process. And that's what they did.
Right. And what it did was it also increased the value of the African slaves that are already here, because you're cutting off the supply as well. Now the other thing is, even though it was illegal after January 1st, 1808, they kept bringing Africans in.
Right until the 1860s. Right up to the
when the Clotilda comes in. Right. So all the Africans,
the one we know about.
Right. That's the last known slave ship we know about.
Yeah.
And that was because of a bet. Timothy Mayer was the white wealthy businessman who made a bet that he can smuggle Africans into the country. But one of the points I want to make, all the Africans that were brought to this country from January 1st, 1808 through July of 1860, when the Clotilda comes in, all that was illegal based upon federal law.
Right.
Okay. So that helps to lay a legal foundation, not a moral foundation, but a legal foundation for reparations, because Europeans violated federal law. Also, there was a tax up to $10 paid for each African that was smuggled, that was brought to the country illegally as well. That's stipulated in the Constitution. Okay. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1. Now, and when we look at the U.S. Supreme Court case of the Amistad, the United States versus the Amistad, those Africans, when their freedom, Joseph St. Q and those other Africans on the Amistad slave ship, they win their freedom in the U.S. Supreme Court, because the U.S. Supreme Court rules that it violated international treaties for those Africans to be captured. It was illegal for them to be brought into the country because the international transatlantic slave trade was abolished, and they were given their freedom. Okay, so this is why we have to understand history and law, and use this. Go ahead.
From the very inception of the nation, slavery was legal. It was a part of American law. America is completely culpable as a nation state.
Yes.
For the crimes against humanity committed against African peoples in the United States of America.
Right.
That's why they keep playing so many games. That's why I got to thank Sister Viola and thank her husband and thank our sister who was the director. Listen, y'all just broke through a brick wall. Okay, you knocked the whole wall down. You know, Black Panther did a good job in cracking that wall, but you just knocked the wall down, because what you showed about Dahomey, and people can scream all they want about they sold us into slavery. You need to get on the ship, get on the plane, go to Africa. If you can go anywhere else on vacation, I see some of y'all going to Paris. That's cool. I've been to Paris. You know what I'm saying? I've been to London and so forth, and Bristol and Liverpool and Leeds and Leicester and all of that stuff. But I've been to Africa. And I've listened to the elders. They still tell you the story of what they did. You can actually go to Benin, go to Dahomey, go to the very palace you see in the movie, and sit there, and the griots will tell you this history.
Right.
If you really want to know it. And the white folks is trying to say, oh, this little group of Black folks sold all of these millions of please.
Exactly.
So let's tell the real story, and let's put the whole picture. let's put Islam in there. I'm sorry, the Salam Alaikum brothers. I was a Salam Alaikum brother too, I understand. But that's not our religion. That was imposed on us just like Christianity. And many of the brothers, and to make it worse, many of the Arab Muslims were selling the black Muslims. There was actually a war in Africa between white Muslims and black Muslims. And that's how a lot of us got sold into the slave trade. And you will find that a large percentage of black Muslims were sold into the United States of America by the white Muslims. Not some indigenous African in Dahomey. Okay?
Right. Yeah, because I know there was you had the Indian Ocean slave trade with the Portuguese and the Arabs.
I'm talking about, there's a whole concept dealing with the jihads of the 1700s and the 1800s, with the raiding down. Once the Ottoman Turks crush the Fatimite dynasty at the end of the 9th century and takes over Islam worldwide, the Ottoman went to war against Africa. This is what destroys Ghana, the ancient Ghana kingdom, and the Mali and Songhai. It is the white Muslims declaring war on the black Muslims and selling us into slavery to the Portuguese and the Dutch. We don't even talk about that because we have such sympathy for Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam and Islam, but we need to talk about that.
Yes. That and because that deals with El Mansur of Morocco invading Songhai in 1591. That right there. And one of the things, and Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay talks about this in like the book Golden Age of the Moors, a fantastic book edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. But Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, who has an essay in that book, along with Renoko Rashidi.
That's the beginning of it. The jihads of the 1800s and is where you really see the explosion of this. With coming down through Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana. You know, that's how the Ashanti gets involved in this thing, because they're fighting with the kingdoms of the Arabized, Islamized kingdoms in northern Ghana, encroaching on the hinterland of Ashanti. Okay, and the Ashanti is selling their prisoners of war, captured in that conflict. The same thing with the Mose people of what is now Burkina Faso. Mose being an indigenous population, but fighting with the Islamic encroachment on what became Upper Volta and later this. You see the same thing in Cote d'Ivoire, with the Yankan people of Cote d'Ivoire, having and another ethnic nation having to fight this Islamic horde coming from the north. And of course, a lot of them end up being black because they're being converted the same way we're being converted to Christianity. But this is the Turkish Ottoman Empire and the Eastern Arab empires. And we don't even discuss it. And you're not going to understand West African transatlantic slave trade unless you know about the Sahara and the Indian Ocean and the East African Islamic slave trade that comes right down into the Western Sudan. Because
that goes back to about 8th century.
The Great Jihads.
The Great Jihad. Okay. Let me just show this quickly and we're going to wrap up. I want to go back to this. I was able to find what I was looking for. So this is dealing with the slave trade and the British economy. This is dealing with the Industrial Revolution. This talks about, this section talks specifically about cotton. Okay. From 1750 onwards, a new industry emerged in Britain, the production of cotton cloth. Wool production had previously been Britain's major industry, but cotton had one key advantage: machinery is better than wool. And then 1793, you have the cotton gin invented here in the U.S., and then you're going to have copies of the cotton gin, which reduces the cost to producing cotton. As a result, it was cotton production that the Industrial Revolution began. As a result, it was in cotton production that the Industrial Revolution began, particularly in and around Manchester, England. The cotton used was mostly imported from slave plantations. Slavery provided the raw material for industrial change and growth. So when we talk about this Industrial Revolution, the foundation of that was the cotton that African slaves grew.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Professor Small.
Well, no, you just laid it out. And the thing that people must understand is that the American banking system was tied in to the British banking system. Full partnership.
Yes.
J.P. Morgan Chase comes out of a tutelage by the House of Rothschild in London. Okay. And they were involved in selling the steel to America, right? To create the rail lines to move the cotton to the docks, put on the ships to send to England. Okay. All tied up, all wrapped up in one neat package. And so when they talk about they were blockading Africa to stop the slave trade, yeah, they were trying to knock out their competition in the Industrial Revolution.
Exactly.
So let's get it straight.
Yep. And everybody, you can this other article here you can check out. I showed it on the screen briefly. I didn't give the name of it. This is a really good article. This is from SmithsonianMag.com, Smithsonian Institute. This deals with the real warriors behind the Woman King, September 15, 2022. It goes through, I printed out all these articles I print out. I have thousands of articles printed out. So it goes through all this history, and it deals with where the movie opens in 1823 also. Okay, because it talks about right here, it opens in 1823 with a successful raid by the Agojie, who freed captives from the enslavement from the clutches of the Oyo Empire and powerful Yoruba state. Okay, so it starts with the opening of the movie. Okay, Professor Small, look, we're going to wrap up here. Once again, I know I've taken one of your online classes you taught a few years ago, and I think it was dealing with the Yoruba, some of the Ifa, things like this. So give people your website address. Let people know about how they can support you, DVD lectures, courses that you offer, things like that.
Yeah, well, right now you can go to my website, ProfessorJamesSmall.com. Then my Facebook page, which is very popular, is ProfessorSmallAfricanWorld.com. Facebook is messing with me for some reason for the last 2 weeks, but I've been too busy to deal with them. I don't know what I said that got them upset. They're blocking all my pages and stuff. But I'll get it soon when I get time to deal with them. But you go to my website, and then my email is amponsa3@gmail.com. amponsa3@gmail.com. I will be starting classes again, starting at the beginning of 2023. I want to finish this Godfather of Harlem piece, which we should be finished at the end of October. It should be coming out the first week in January. It's better than the last two by 100 miles. You're gonna love it, right? Because we got more courage, we got braver. You're gonna see a Nesta Che Guevara. You're going to see Che Guevara and Malcolm. You're going to see the CIA trying to kill both of them. You're going to see the FBI plotting Malcolm's assassination. I put it all out there. We're going to.
And you, as the historical consultant, you go through and you review the script. You let them know, okay, it didn't happen this way. This is not realistic. Things like that. That's your job on the show. Because at the end of each show, when you watch the credits, your name is in the credits. Go ahead.
Right. So I work with some brothers, Chris Brancato, who is the showrunner and the chief writer. I mean, beautiful guy, and Michael and Paul, who's a brother out in California. We consult on concepts, ideas, and principles. Like, how does this concept look? Like right now, here's what we're doing. We're trying to figure out, how do we do the assassination without replicating Spike Lee or replicating other movies about the assassination? I can't tell you what we're going to do, but it's going to be very unique, and we're not going to see. And my thing was, I don't want to see him getting shot. How do we handle that?
Right.
How the writers handle it is just beautiful, right? But still tell the story as accurately as you can, right?
Exactly.
You keep the dignity of Sister Betty and the children and the family, you know. showing Malcolm as a diplomat. We've got him in Mecca, all right? We've got him in Ghana giving a speech, and we got him in Cairo speaking to all that's going to be up in there. We got a meeting with Che Guevara. You know, we've got a meeting with Kwame Nkrumah. So you're going to see stuff that no one else has shown. Okay. And then we got a relationship between him and Bumpy Johnson, his friend, trying to keep him alive and trying to protect him. Then we bring the CIA into play through the Cuban drug lords, right, into Harlem. And then we get the FBI coming in, wanting to stop Malcolm. But see, that gets hidden in other pieces. They talk about the Nation of Islam, but they don't talk about these other forces. So we're going to deal with the other forces big time out front.
You know, I deal with this in my classes. There's a good article, and you just hit on a little bit of this. There's a good article by Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post. It deals with the day Dr. King met Malcolm X, March 26, 1964, at the U.S. Senate debate for the Civil Rights Act. Martin Luther King Jr. met Malcolm X just once. The photo still haunts us with what was lost. But what I want to hit on very quickly.
Down in Selma in the movie, we got him doing the speech in Selma. We got a meeting with Andy Young. We got a meeting with Coretta. We're going to tell the story hard.
Well, Malcolm gets in. What I was going to hit on, when Malcolm officially separates from the Nation of Islam, March 8, 1964, Malcolm gets involved in the Civil Rights Movement.
Right.
Okay. And that's a part of Malcolm's life that's not talked about a lot. You got to do some research to understand this. You can't just quote excerpts of Malcolm's speeches. And Malcolm, the Battle of the Bullet that he first delivers that I know of, March 29, 1964, in Washington Heights, New York. One of the things he's talking about in the speech is interjecting Black nationalism into the Civil Rights Movement.
Right.
Okay.
He actually has a meeting in 65. And Ruby Dee's brother's Tom's house in Queens. And he meets with all of the civil rights leaders there. The only one that didn't make it was Dr. King, but
Dr. King,
he sent his rep.
And
they agreed that they would work together. And Fannie Mahima, who was at that meeting, invites him to come to Mississippi, a lecture that would have taken place of 2 weeks after he was assassinated.
Right. In the documentary, Make It Plain, they talk about that, but they said it was at Juanita Portier's house.
No, it was Tom's house.
Tom's house? Okay.
Tom's house.
And what was his relation to Ruby Dee?
His brother. That's Ruby Dee's brother.
Ruby Dee's brother. Okay. Ozzie Davis's wife, and Ruby Dee.
They were very close to Malcolm, that whole family.
Right.
So
exactly.
Belafonte, of course. He was, those men were.
Because they had this meeting. They had this meeting with the major civil rights leaders and Malcolm, so they could put all their differences out on the table and work together. That's basically what the meeting.
And this is what forced Hoover to get more aggressive towards Malcolm's removal. Hoover, if you think he had an issue with Dr. King being a Messiah, now Malcolm and Dr. King talking about uniting, this guy's obviously gone crazy in D.C. at this time.
Right.
And that's when he gave that order, do something about him. Well, you can't buy him. He won't take your money. You can't frighten him. What does do something about Malcolm X mean?
Right. This is what I was getting at. When they met, they only met for a couple of minutes. When they met, Malcolm told Dr. King, "I'm throwing myself into the heart of the civil rights struggle." This is what Malcolm was doing. And one of the things that Malcolm talked about in the Battle of the Bullet is registering African Americans in Harlem to vote as independents. And he's going through talking about the importance of understanding politics and getting involved politically. And then June 28, 1964, when he delivers his speech announcing the formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the speech that people call By Any Means Necessary. He lays out this 5-point platform, and he talks about voter registration in there. He talks about economics, of course, and education, but he talks about political engagement and voter registration as well, and understanding how to leverage.
That was not new with Malcolm, because when he was still in the nation, he was trying to work with the Freedom Now Party, but the messenger stopped it. So he always been trying to have that kind of engagement, but the nation wanted to remain a religious organization and not a political organization. That was part of the conflict that got him separated from the nation.
Exactly. And, you know, July 31st, 1963, Malcolm sends a letter. He's in the Nation of Islam. He sends a letter to the leading civil rights organizers, including Dr. King, and he's requesting a meeting with them that's going to take place in Harlem, New York. I think it was August of 67, right around that time, August of 63. And Malcolm was calling for a unification of the civil rights leaders and their followers. He said that we have to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. This is what Malcolm was doing while he's in the nation. He's calling for unification of the civil rights leaders and their followers. He's saying that we should be able to submerge our minor differences, the Negro leaders submerge our minor differences to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. And this is what we need to do today, brother.
Yeah. And so when you read that, I wish you'd send me that article. I like to take it to the
I'll send it to you. I've got thousands of articles, Professor Small. Seriously, I'll send it to you.
Right around those issues right now. And see, when you see that, then you understand why the split with the nation. You see the hand of COINTELPRO.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
COINTELPRO is well at work in the nation at this time. And the one thing they want to do is destroy the partnership between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. And they were able to effectively do that in November 63. And once they got him out, they went to work to make sure they could never get back together. And then as Malcolm slides, as he does, to move in partner with Dr. King, they killed him.
Yep. Exactly. Well, look, brother, it's been fantastic. People have learned so much. Everybody support Professor James Small and support the African History Network again. Here's his website, ProfessorJamesSmall.com, ProfessorJamesSmall.com. And then his Cash App also is $ Dr. James Small, $, Dr. James Small. And then be sure to support the African History Network as well. Well, look, brother, it's been fantastic. I know you got to run.
Let's go ahead. Come back and call out the Woman King. That's why we came together, and people should go and watch it. It's an extraordinary document. It's a good movie if you just want to be entertained with some really fantastic acting. But if you want to have your African melanin stimulated, this will do it. I guarantee.
Absolutely. You know? You'll come away blown away by this movie. You'll come away wanting to learn more about African history and who you are. That's what happened with Malik. That's so powerful. I'm going to do my DNA sometime. So I'm going to use African ancestry.
Yeah, I did African ancestry. I did my mitochondria, which is my grandma, and that's 100% Sierra Leone. But I knew my great grandma who came from West Africa, and I knew my great grandpa, my great grandpa who came from East Africa on my grandma's side. She was the root woman, the Yoruba priestess, the Dada, and the plantation I grew up on. So it's just so much of it is like, wow. I mean, like I said, I don't cry in movies. These people had me crying. I mean, the tears.
Right. Me too. I shed some tears at the end too.
It was like I almost lost my breath a couple of times. And stunning the way they did the essays and solve, the conflict resolutions they brought about with the situations that was clear, the problems, how they solved the problems. Let me explain to people what I'm saying. When you're making a movie, you create problems, you create contradictions. And the movie is about how you bring resolution to the contradictions, right? They just do a fantastic job of it.
Exactly.
And Miss Davis is just, when you see her, she is the Woman King. When you see her, she is the warrior general leader. No doubt about it.
Naniska. Yep. And Naniska was a real Agojie, but she wasn't a general. So I listened to an interview. I've listened to a number of interviews that Gina Prince-Bythewood, the director, has done, as well as Viola Davis. And Gina Prince-Bythewood said that the character of Naniska was an amalgamation. Yeah. It's a combination of different Agojie.
Most heroine and heroes, when you dealing with fictionalized fictionalized history, it is an amalgamation of multiple characters.
Right.
And that's how you make it work. And they made it work because, like I said, this could have happened anywhere in Africa, and it did happen in multiple places in Africa. And so,
right, exactly.
If you want something to, and people are upset and saying, "Oh, this is fiction," then go study the history and tell me the story.
Study the real history. Okay. Yep, that's why we're doing this show, to deal with the real history. Because what happens is movies that have a historical foundation but a lot of fiction in them, it causes people to want to know more about the real history. That's why I'm doing this show. That's why I contacted Professor Small. I contacted Sylvian Diop, who wrote Fighting the Slave Trade. I'm trying to get in touch with her. I talked to Dr. Talitha LaFloria, who wrote, who's the author of this book here. We've had her on the show before. Chained in Silence, Black Women and Convict Labor in the New South. Dr. Talitha LaFloria. We've had her here on the African History Network show before. Yeah, and she had not seen the movie yet. She wants to see it, so I'm gonna try to get her on. We're gonna try to get some sister scholars on also as well.
No, this
okay, brother. Look, go ahead.
Good work to the whole crew.
Yeah,
and what they've done is raise the bar in terms of the kind of pieces that will now be presented to the Black community about our history.
Right.
And if they don't give her the Academy Award, I'm gonna have to suit up and boot up and go out to Hollywood and handle it.
She deserves it. Absolutely. And you know, director Gina Prince-Bythewood, she credits the success of the film Black Panther for opening the door for this movie to be funded. This has a $50 million budget. She credits the film Black Panther because Black Panther did 1.3 billion worldwide. Number one movie for 5 weeks in a row. She credits the success of that movie for being able to open the door for them to be able to do this movie. Okay, so that's powerful. Well, look, brother, I know you got to run. Sir. So thanks for taking your time out of your busy schedule, man. We'll talk soon, and we'll talk about your classes.
Okay,
also,
Brother Michael. Thank you for inviting me. I always enjoy my
peace.
Time with you. Peace and blessings.
Me too, brother. All right. Hotep. Peace.